Welcome back to the Rugby Rundown on a Thursday this time. Jan and I decided to wait until after Rassie spouted his wisdoms at the press conference. Otherwise, we'd be talking in a vacuum. And yeah, good value as always. Welcome back, Jan.
Morning, welcome, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's always lucky to chat rugby, and as you know, I enjoy chatting with you, and we have some good insights.
Yeah, the first thing that caught my eye was Rassie saying that, yeah, they're not used to playing with bonus points except in the World Cup. I mean, that's absolute nonsense. I think you probably forgot about the Rugby Championship. Shows you how important it is in, in their minds at the moment because the whole competition is built around bonus points and the likes. Just talk to me about that.
Yeah, so there's two things at play here. First is Rassie likes shooting at the hip, which is why we love him, because he's honest, he's straight up front. But so sometimes maybe he misses it or he forgets something. The other alternative could be that it's just a language thing. It's a typical lost in translation situation. I would lean towards the latter, is that Rassie wanted to say something and that he's not going to focus on bonus points and tournament standings. He wants to focus game by game. And that makes sense to me, that Rassie first wants to focus on where he's going with the team, that he's building towards the World Cup. Obviously, every game you want to win. And he repeatedly says that. Every time you speak to him, he says, every game we play to win. That's understandable. But is he planning to rotate his team? He admitted he's going to rotate his team. So how does he achieve that? That means if you start focusing on things like bonus points and stuff, that you have to score 5 tries and all sorts of things. I'm sorry, apologies, 4 tries and all that sort of stuff. So the reality is that Rassie wants to stick to his program, his plan, and his master plan of building depth in the squad ahead of the World Cup, making sure that South African rugby is strong past 2031. So in that regard, I think what he meant is he's going to focus game by game, and if you keep winning every game, be it without bonus points, you're still going to win the tournament, because other guys are going to get 4 bonus points per game to match you, and that's physically impossible. You know, at best they can get 2 bonus points, but if you win, you get 4 points, they get 2 points. You know, so New Zealand can, let's say for argument's sake, because we're in New Zealand's pool, so New Zealand can win every game, but they lose 1 game. So they get bonus points, so they get 12 points. But you win all your games, you get 12 points. Then it's points difference and all sorts of things, and the points difference will be better because you win all your games. So there's lots of things at play. So I think Rassie probably just misspoken, and all he wanted to say was he's focusing on game. The next thing he's focused right now is England and beating England.
The interesting thing for me is, and that raises a question, is are the Springboks taking the Nations Championship seriously? You can say, yeah, we're only focused on winning each game, which makes sense to a degree. But there is now something at stake here. And I for one, can't be told that Rassie's not going to try and win this thing. I mean, imagine England or Ireland or the All Blacks or somebody wins this Nations Championship. It's definitely going to be a bit of a psychological blow. Because you want to go into next year, the World Cup year, with your head held high, confidence high. And if you actually now lose it, that's probably a setback, except if you decide from day one you don't care about it. And I can't see a guy like Rassie saying, I don't care about this kind of championship.
No, he definitely cares. I think same last year. Remember, we went into the Australian game and we got a huge wake-up call. And thereafter, the Boks was a different team. So we might get a wake-up call somewhere, and he wants to win. I just don't think he's looking at it from a perspective of, this is now a tournament, we must get bonus points and we must do this and we must move. I think if there's a loss, let's say for argument's sake we lose against England in the opening match, things will change. He suddenly won't rotate as much. You will find that then suddenly Rassie will, so he'll make adjustments. He'll stick to a more of a core team. He won't rest as many players, because we already know he's resting players. And some of the injured players, like Cobus Reinig, won't play before, and Rassie said it already, he won't play before the All Blacks. He can be available for England, he can be ready, or for Scotland, but he's not going to push him back. He would rather let him settle, because the long-term goal is the World Cup, and he wants Cobus there at the World Cup. And how do you keep him safe? Eben Etzebeth, is Eben going to play every game? Is Sia going to play every game? Can you afford to risk these guys by playing them every game and playing your best team? No, that's a huge risk. So Rassie's plan is to rotate his players, and he made it pretty clear. He wants to rotate and give caps to players and get them ready for the World Cup, make sure they comfortable in the Bok environment, in a Bok jersey when they in the starting 15. So I think that's his goal. But if we lose the first game, there'll be less rotation for sure.
The interesting thing that he did say is, this squad of 46 players, it's not like the World Cup squad where you announce your players and then you have to play them. You can only pick from them, except if there's an injury like happened to Andre Pollard replacing Malcolm Marx. This is simply a group of players that he's pulled in, and he can change and chop and change, and he probably will chop and change them. I'm more interested in the omissions than the inclusions. So we'll get to the inclusions just now about the younger players being fast-tracked there, but specific exclusions for me is Faf, playing for the Springboks last weekend and now not even being in the squad. And for me personally, most importantly, what's the story of Elrigh Louw? Rassie actually addressed most of these names in the press conference, and a very passing reference to Elrigh. No indication of whether he's injured or he's out of form. I don't actually know what's going on there, and I'm a little worried about that player specifically. But talk to me about the omissions, what he said there.
Okay, so the Elrigh Louw thing, the way I read that statement, he was actually asked about Johanna Augustus, and he tried to explain that Johanna is in the picture, but he's behind these players. So he mentioned Evan, and he mentioned Jasper, and he mentioned Hanekom, and he mentioned Elrigh. So that in the top 4 number 8s, or top 4, because he talks about the tiers 5 and 6. So he's trying to build it tiers 5 and 6, and people think it's ridiculous. It's not as absurd as you think. He's busy building that. That's why he rotates. So what he was trying to say is Johanna is injured and he's there. So he's going to try Elrigh, because his words were, once we have tried X, Y, Z, and Elrich's name was in that group that he said. So he's going to try him at some stage. It might be against Wales, or it might be against Australia, or against Argentina. A game that doesn't have such a major impact. So we know Elrigh will come back. Same with Faf. He says he's tried Faf. He knows what Faf can do. And I think we all know what Faf can do. But he wants to also give the youngsters, Herschel Yankees, is he better than Faf? Not in my opinion, but Rassie wants to see him. Rassie wants to do something. So Rassie is trying him, and he knows Faf can come back any day. He can call him back. If something happens in the scrum half injury, he's got 4 scrum halves, and he wants to see what Herschel, he wants to give Herschel a chance now. So all these positions, you'll see that there's a number of tiers. Yeah, it's surprising, and I don't think many people realize that, and they probably think it's a lunacy, but Rassie is busy working where he's got 4 teams, and he's already pretty close to it. Personally, I think his first tier team and his second tier team is pretty close to each other. They're both almost on the same, and we've seen this at World Cups, and then his third team and his fourth team are also off test rugby. And the point I wanted to make is, we can already field 4 teams of test quality. Will they all beat the All Blacks and Australia and England and France? No. But our first 2 teams, and this is where Rassie is going. That's why you have these players. So you have 4 tiers of number 8s, 4 tiers of scrum halves, 5 tiers, 6 tiers. So that sort of depth and that's why all these youngsters are involved. That sort of depth is going to take us through to the World Cup. So we know that after next year's World Cup, the likes of Etzebeth and Kolisi and Louw de Jager and Peter Steff and those guys are all going to retire, because they're going trying to get a 3rd World Cup in a row, which is it's a great ambition. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? That's a challenge. That's a push. But we South Africans, we're going to try it anyway. So the real thing is, he's already building for 2031, and people don't understand. That's why he's going to have 4 tiers of teams. So when the first tier goes, he's already got 3 tiers in place. And I think people are missing that point. It's not about a test tomorrow. It's not just about a test tomorrow. And that's why, to get back to your earlier question about why is he not talking about bonus points? Because he's building on this. This is part of his program. In these tests, he's going to look to win the test and introduce players to test rugby. Some new youngsters. I mean, Riley Norton, we've already spoken often about our depth at lock, and we think it's thin. Now he's proving. We've got another player that could be the next Evan or the next Matfield or whatever, but he's bringing him in. So the Baby Boxers lost their captain, But the Springboks are benefiting from that. And it's that enormous depth that he's busy building that people underestimate.
No, I understand all of that. I'm just specifically concerned about Elrich, because we said specifically when we spoke to John Coronelli that Rassie in the past would say, Cameron Hanekom is not being considered because he's injured. XYZ is not being considered because he's injured or whatever reason. The only reference that he made to Elrich Louw specifically was when asked about John Augustus, he said, and I'm quoting, we track all players, all competitions that we think when we do our depth chart, and we try to get 5 or 6 positions, like you just said, deep in a position. And Jano was definitely in that scope, but he's still injured, and unfortunately, therefore, he's not available. So when we tested Evan Roos and tested Jasper and tested Cameron, and maybe Elrich comes back into the mix and we test him. That's all he said about Elrich. Nothing about he's injured or something, anything. That's what I'm a little bit concerned about. And I'm harping on about this. But like I said, he's an adopted son of this channel. So it feels like my own son wasn't selected for the Springboks. So I want to know what's going on here. And you talk about Rassie being honest. This is not straightforward. This is not that straightforward. There seems, I don't know, what am I missing here?
Yeah, maybe he is injured. Maybe he was injured in the final that he struggled. That's why he didn't do so well. Who knows? Maybe he took an injury into the game that he didn't tell them about, and it's now come out, and they're just quietly keeping it away, and he's just going out there, fix himself up, and come back when he's good and ready again. I'm not sure, but is Elrich better than Jarno? I don't see enough of Jarno to know. I know people rave him, and the guy who asked the question had an agenda. I know him very well. He's got an agenda. He asks in every possible opportunity, ask about Jarno. So, it's the same with the guys that will ask in every possible press conference. They'll ask about Salman Murat, and they because that's their player. So sometimes people come into these press conferences with an agenda, and sometimes they ask genuine questions. I think in this case, the question was asked with an agenda, and that's why Elrich's name was just thrown in the mix, because Rassie wanted to make the point of how many players he's looking at, and that's where it comes back to my tears. I know I went a bit long-winded earlier, but he said, I'm looking at all these players. So there's 5 tiers of number 8 of loose forwards that he's already looking at. And if you look at this team when he announced his team, he's got all these utility forwards, Pieter-Steph, Franco. Riley Norton is listed as a utility forward. That means Riley is going to be tried as a loose forward. I don't think he's going to be tried as a proper hooker, but he's going to be tried as a loose forward. And Riley is clearly bulked up. I think anybody who's watched a bit or watched the Barbers game would see that Riley is not the same scrawny that came back from the championships last year. He's a proper. He's maturing. He still qualifies to play under 20. That's why he was our captain. So he's still a baby. So he's got another 2 or 3 years of bulking, of growing. And, so imagine what he's going to be like when he's 24, 25. So anyway, I'll go on again. The point that I think Rassie was, and the point that we should not miss, is that he wanted to show that he's monitoring so many tiers of players in every position. So Riley, he's got so many locks, and he's got other players who can play lock. So Pieter-Steph and Franco Mostert, and Riley can play lock, and then he's got his 4 frontline locks. So he's got 4 locks plus another 3 guys. So now he's down to 7 players in the lock position, and that's what the point people sometimes miss. They look at a position, and they'll ask about. In your case, you ask about Elrich. Another guy asked about Jarno, and I don't mean to belittle you, but you have an agenda for that. It's not a bad agenda. It's not bad to have agendas, but you have an agenda. So you look at the position. When you step back and you look at the bigger picture, you suddenly realize, hold on a second, but Rassie is busy with something else here. And perhaps that's the picture that most of us miss.
Yeah, no. I stand properly corrected. Thank you, Jan, for pointing out the error of my ways. I'm kidding. All I'm saying is it's just interesting that they're not saying why he's not there, and he was actually sort of, penciled in the past. That's all I'm getting at. Let's move on. Riley Norton, you just said, and Rassie went to great lengths to explain why they chose a young player, like he just basically still under 20, ahead of a player like JJ van der Mesh. And everybody was sort of, wondering about JJ van der Mesh, the big bruising kind of a player. And Rassie explained why he went for someone like Riley Norton, basically bypassing a lot of maturing almost, in the URC week after week, grinding away. and giving him a chance to walk into the Springbok side. And there's a couple of people that are very upset about that. The fact that, guys who have been playing week after week, like I just said, now being sort of bypassed. And that was an interesting thing to me, that Rossi prefers the Riley Norton type of player ahead of the JJ van der Mes type of player. What did he say about that?
I see his point. Again, I see his point because I'm looking at the bigger picture. Riley Norton is the type of player that is planning for the future. Yes, JJ is the form player. He's in the Premiership. He's a massive player, but he's a bulk of a player. It's like comparing Victor Matfield to Cobus Wiese. If you got the two next to each other, I mean, they don't come from the same era, but Victor Matfield's a very different player to Cobus Wiese. Cobus Wiese was a big ball carrier, a scrummager, and very seldom jumped in the lineups. JJ van der Mes is this big ball carrier, straight up down the middle. That's not the type of lock Rassie now wants. That's why he's got mobile. So what does that tell you? He's planning to evolve the game to a more mobile pack of forwards. So he's done with these big bulky guys. He wants guys who can move around the park, got big engines and can carry on. So is JJ out of the picture? No, but he was in the alignment camp, the virtual alignment camps. So he's a good player. He's one of the best in the Premiership. And I'm sure a lot of countries would jump at the opportunity to select him, much like France did with Paul Willemse. Paul Willemse didn't suit the Springbok agenda at the time, or the Springbok profile at the time. And I'm sure JJ will feel unhappy because if his dream is to play for the Springboks, to hear that sort of talk. But again, step back, look at the bigger picture, and then say, maybe Rassie has got a plan that we're missing and that we don't quite understand.
All right, then talk to me about Paul de Villiers. I hear he's been practicing line-out throws as well. Is he now going to end up at hooker as well, like everybody else, like Marco van Staden, like Jan-Hendrik Wessels, like Dion Fourie? Is that now the trend? If you're a flanker, you're going to end up at hooker? Because, like you just said, the most striking thing about the squad is athleticism, speed, even the scrum halves. Everybody is so fast. Is that where the Springboks are going? Move away from the more bruising, run over you kind of a thing and rather just run past you?
I think there's definitely a evolution, ongoing evolution in the Springbok team. So I think for the World Cup next year, Russia is not just freshening up, making sure there's enough youth there, enough energy, and enough mobility at the World Cup. Because we will still have defense. We will still work on have our defense, our style of defense. So that will be there. We'll never lose that. We'll still have our set pieces. The scrums will still function because we've got monster props. And so I think, to get back to Paul, I wouldn't put it past Rassie if he's busy grooming him, much like he did with Marco. Making sure that if the need be, he doesn't have to call up another hooker. He's got now two loose forwards that can play hooker as well, and work on him. They did the same thing at the World Cup with Marco. The first time we realized that Marco was practicing was when we asked about Malcolm Marx, and Rassie said, no, he's got enough cover, and then he mentioned Marco. That's the first time he let us in on the fact that Marco has been practicing hooker already. So, and I think Paul de Villiers is stocky enough to play hooker, but I don't think it's going to be his primary position, merely as a backup. And that's how Rassie operates. And I think that's what a lot of people miss the point is we're human beings, and we've got our own personal preferences. And sometimes we look at the position and the player, and why is he not there? Why is Evan Roos not there? Maybe it's because Evan Roos doesn't fit Rassie's plan. Now Evan Roos has adjusted his game. He's still prone to the odd brain explosion, but he's getting better. So he's played himself back into the picture. That doesn't mean he's going to start ahead of Jasper every game. Jasper's still our premier number 8, but Evan is better. And same will happen with Paul. He'll play mostly flank, and if the need arises, he can slot in and help at hooker if need be. But I just want to share this, and people tend to forget that Cheslin Kolbe, the smallest player in the team, has already thrown in the lineouts in the test and jumped in the lineouts in the test. He was lifted by 2 locks nonetheless, but it's the easiest thing to lift a small player like that. You can go much higher than lifting a lock. and throwing into the lineup, suddenly, what do you have? You've got this nippy player behind the thing, and you've got a scrum half somewhere else. Or if a scrum half goes off, I think in this case it was a scrum half that was sent off, and Cheslin threw in the lineup. So again, just to come back to my point, Rassie's always thinking with a plan. I think he's 2 steps ahead of the rest of the world, and we're all still trying to catch up. And one day when we catch up to Rassie, we're going to be so shocked at what really goes on in that, and how genius he really is.
Yeah. The one thing about Cheslin that worries me is that, he can sidestep an entire team, but he can't sidestep a cameraman. But yeah, that's a story for another.
I do have to share this with you. So I did, as you will know, I did an article on it about whether that was an accident or was it plain stupidity. And I actually reached out to the broadcaster for comment about this, and I'll get to that just now. Because World Rugby's law says there's a 5-meter barrier. Those guys are not supposed to be that close to the players, to the playing field. It's not supposed to be. It's, and I know SA Rugby don't want to throw the broadcaster under the bus, but, I'm sure privately there were a couple of interesting calls or emails. But I've reached out to the broadcaster and asked them for comment, and I with this thing, what they came back to me that at this stage they're not going to comment because it was just an accident. And then I replied to the guy and I said to him, an accident is not when you breach World Rugby's regulations. He was not supposed to be on the field, period. He's supposed to be 5 meters back. When I pointed that out to him, he suddenly went quiet, says, we're not going to comment. So it's when you have a monopoly, and this is my pet hate. Apologize, I don't want to hijack your podcast here, but my pet hate is the monopoly that this broadcaster has in South Africa. So there's no competition for this broadcaster. They pay SA Rugby and they do what they like. They've got unfiltered, unfettered access to the Springboks, and we get left with 10 minutes at the beginning of a press conference. You get one question, and if you don't ask a question right, or you get somebody who asks a really brain-dead question and wastes 3 minutes of your time, when nobody can use that content, and you end up and that's all because the broadcaster has exclusive rights and monopoly of the game. And that, to me, that in England and New Zealand and everywhere else, the guys you get unfiltered. Even the vloggers or whatever, our podcasters can use the content more than just that first 10 minutes, which often gets taken up by people with fans with cell phones that hijack that first opening 10 minutes.
Well, you raised the issue of pet peeves. Now, I'm going to tell you my pet peeve. This 10-minute rule of Rassie of the SA Rugby that you can only have a recording of the first 10 minutes. This is like the army. In the old days when you did something wrong, the entire platoon was punished for what one guy did wrong. So what happened here last year, one of our fellow podcasters would sit in the press conference, and when the questions switched over to Afrikaans, would stop recording and publish it immediately so that it will be up on his YouTube channel right even before the press conference was over. Which means he broke the rules, like you just said, with the cameraman of the broadcaster, like you referred to him, being on the field, breaking the rules. So now, why do you punish all of us who actually behave and keep to the rules for the one guy that did it the wrong way? He broke the rules. He must be punished. So what I'm saying is, we're trying to get people to understand rugby better, know what's going on behind the scenes. We're not really fanboys. We try to have an informed opinion. But we get 10 minutes of the content. Sorry, that was my pet peeve. I just got one.
Don't worry, I definitely support you. I've asked that question already, but that's besides the point. The reasoning also doesn't make sense to me because, like you say, we get punished because. But a lot of that, apart from the fact that the fans with the cell phones or the fans with the laptops don't stick to the agenda, don't stick to the adhered protocols. That's probably the better word. They don't stick to the protocols. We now get punished, but it also has to do with the broadcaster's exclusivity. They can sit in that's the other thing is, and they can sit in the press conference, the broadcaster, and film everything we ask, and then afterwards they get exclusive one-on-one time with. So we on a lose-lose situation here. But anyway,
Yeah.
we still get the job done. We still inform our viewers one way or another. We'll inform our viewers.
Yeah, you know what, John? I actually just want to say something, in closing. We have such good relationship with the unions, the franchises. We know what's going on there. We can actually give informed opinions about what's really going on, talk to the people behind the scenes without fear of favor. And we can't do that with the most important team in South Africa, the Springboks. It's like behind a veil, it's behind like a curtain, like you just said, and it's not the same overseas. Those teams treat them differently. Yeah, there are some exceptions. Like some of the unions, like I think Wales, are particularly bad at this. But the point is just, I don't like this attitude. But anyway, let's move on. Talking about the bomb squad quickly. We said, the big thing is Kwagga Smith is not available. Now, Kwagga is your ultimate hybrid player. He can actually go play in the back line if he wanted to. And he can cover all the loose forward positions. He might not necessarily be a hooker. But now if you look at a like-for-like replacement in terms of the bomb squad, Paul de Villiers is probably the name that jumps to mind, like we just discussed, but he's more of a flanker slash hooker. I don't think you can cover open blindside or eighth man, for example. That leaves a bit of a gap in terms of the composition of the bomb squad, don't you think?
Yeah, I also think Paul doesn't have the skill sets of Kwagga, but there's not many people in this game that has the skill set of Kwagga. At the Lions, they've got JC Pretorius. He's got the same skill set, but he just hasn't come through yet. I also think he's been struggling with injuries for the last couple of years. So I always thought that JC Pretorius will come through and fill that role. So at a push, you can push on his number, but I don't think he's had enough game time this year to warrant a look at that or filling that gap. But that's the closest in terms of skill set, pure skill set, pace, strength, all that stuff. And he's the closest thing we have to Kwagga outside. The other guys have all got different skill sets. So yeah, also I think Russia is going to find another way of dealing with that. You'll probably find that he'll have three flanks there, with one of those flanks being somebody who can play lock. So I have Pieter-Steph du Toit there and move him to lock, and then bring on another. So you have two breakdown specialists or somebody who can play in general.
But the interesting thing that Russell also said, one of the other interesting things was he's not that concerned about scrums anymore, And I think that, it's being proven by the fact that he chose these mobile props, number one, Junu and the likes. Wilco is probably the slowest of them all. And then he's saying that he's not going to really go for penalties. It's more about tiring out your opposition and the likes. But scrums are not that important. It's only important when it wins you a World Cup final. And I'm quoting here. That's an interesting sort of change of emphasis, don't you think?
Yeah, I think Russia's also realized if you look at the numbers, we used to have 12 or 15 scrums a match. Very, very seldom do you get near 10 scrums a match. It's like 5 or 6. And if you get, like we've seen in the URC final, if you get a referee that insists that the ball must be played instead of letting the dominant scrum continue and win a penalty, then that value of having that powerful pack and those slow, monstrous props gets diminished. So I think Rassie knows that. So he wants to have the alternate. Again, and people miss the point, is Rassie he's looking beyond just, yes, we've got this. If we know we're going to play, let's say England, we're going to play England. England come with a big scrum, and we know England's got big props, and we know England likes set pieces. So how do you counter that? You counter them at source. So we'll go for the big forwards. Do you play Wales, who like to run all day? Then you play mobile props. So yeah, I think it's just Rassie thinking ahead. But there's definitely less scrums in the game, and that probably might also be a contributing factor.
Yeah, that to me was probably the most eye-opening thing they said in that podcast. Like I just said, the fact that he might change the squad after the first test even already. That's interesting. 46 players is a lot of players to have in a squad. But interestingly enough, that's probably because, and Harry referred to it on our podcast the other day, Jake White told us once that on average, your net injury rate per game, players coming back from injury and players going out of injury, you lose on average 1.5 players per match to injury. So, for example, after 3 matches in this Nations Championship, you might have lost 4.5 or 5 players. that already makes a difference. So now the utility side of it becomes even more important. So what are you thinking in terms of the planning ahead for the All Blacks? Because there's a bit of a short break after that. And then we're right into the All Blacks. And also, the more interesting thing for me as well is the franchises have to prepare for the All Blacks. Without their frontline players, they've now been off for a month. It interrupts their URC preparation. Jan Ackerman spoke about that specifically. What about that side of it? I mean, this is a bit of I don't know, poor planning maybe.
Yeah, it is a challenge. It's a really, really tricky challenge to plan. Okay, so let's first take Rassie. I mean, he also mentioned that he's got another 10, 15 players that's on the fringes that are either injured or rested. So he's got 46 players. Add another 15 players. That means it gives you 60 players. We're already at 4 teams deep, you know. So you now look at the Bulls team. They've lost, apart from the 4 guys that are 3 moved on and 1 has retired. They also 12 players are with the Springboks. Sorry, two of those are already left the Bulls. So 10 players. So they've got the 4 players that departed and 10 players with the Springboks. That's an entire starting 15 for the Bulls. So you know that it's going to be a very weak Bulls team, a second tier. And now I'd ask you, what is the depth at the Bulls? Ackerman says the youngsters have to step up. That question was, I specifically asked him that question. And he said, these youngsters must now step up. It's their opportunities. They get to play the All Blacks. And the same at the Lions. Okay, Lions hasn't got that much. The Sharks, they've lost quite a few players who's with the Boks. So but they've been playing their youngsters through the latter part of the URC. And the Stormers have now lost quite a few players. So the Stormers are going to be a challenge as well, because I don't think they've got that depth yet. We do know that the Bulls are recruited quite wisely. So you got Andre Liebenberg, a very seasoned loose forward coming back, and you got Kerwin Bosch that will fill that gap where Andre Pollard is there. So they will have some depth, but it's definitely, he hasn't got much time. So the challenge is not whether he's going to have the players. There'll be players there, but does he have enough time with the players? And that's the challenge, because he's first got to give the bulk of his squad time off, and that'll be a week or 2. And then in the middle of July, he's got to get them back for some sort of pre-season, as he said, prepare for the All Blacks. Once he's done with the All Blacks game, he's going to taper it off again and start preparing for the URC. So he's got no real break and pre-season. It's very much what happened to him last year. You know, he's without the bulk of almost an entire starting 15. Same at the Stormers, less at the Sharks and Lions. But, you know, that's a massive chunk of players that's missing, that only arrives back in December. So, yeah, there's a massive challenge. You know, you start your URC season, and they still got the under 23 teams still got to play in the Currie Cup. So some of those under 23 players will play against the All Blacks, and then go back and start playing the Currie Cup again, because the Currie Cup starts in July.
Right. You know, SA Rugby keeps going on about the 12-month season, and then what they do is they just add more games to it, you know, make it even worse. By the end of December, we're all going to be crying for the coaches' heads, because why are we not winning? But we forget about the fact that we didn't allow them to prepare properly, you know, that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have very short memories, you know, as rugby fans. Okay, yeah, just you know, turning our attention to New Zealand. We just mentioned them, you know, coming to South Africa. The franchises have to play against them. But what's interesting this week is Graham Henry, who's now a selector of the All Blacks under coach Dave Rennie, was on our friend Martin Devlin's podcast, and Martin likes, you know, poking the bear, if I can call it that, and he said that stirring things up. But we know him; he's also going to be on our podcast during the course of the Greatest Rivalry Tour. What did Graham Henry say? He had quite a bit to say about the fact that Rassie is, you know, rotating players so extravagantly, almost, let's call it that. But he actually likes it. Then Martin Devlin had something to say about that as well. You wrote an article to tell us about that.
Yeah. So Martin, yes, he likes to stir, but that's what you do in a country like New Zealand. You need to rile up the people a bit. You know, we've got some of those guys here as well. I mean, luckily they're not as popular or as well known as Martin, but he wanted to stir a bit. So he spoke about the All Blacks last year having beaten the Springboks in, he said, 3 of the 4 quarters. It's actually 3 of the 4 halves, because it's 2 matches. And Graham Henry obviously disagreed with him. He says, yeah, we will never, even though the All Blacks also used 46 players last year, believe it or not, he says, no, we will never cheapen the All Black jersey. So that got Graham Henry who won the World Cup in 2011, got a bit upset. He's 80 years old, so I think his patience is a bit thin and is wearing a bit thin at the moment. So he said to him, I don't think Russia is cheapening the Springbok jersey. You know, he says, in New Zealand, we're arrogant about our position. And the fact is, New Zealand dropped to third or fourth on the world rankings because they lost a few times. They also lost on the year-end tour, whereas the Springboks didn't. So that gap between South Africa and New Zealand seems to have stretched. They said, who's the number one team in the world? And then, you know, our friend Devlin, Martin Devlin, tried to stir a bit more. And Graham Henry said to him, they've won the try. He called it the Tri Nations, and then Martin Devlin tried to correct him and say it's a rugby championship. So Graham Henry, typical Graham Henry fashion, said to him, rugby champions or whatever they call it, you know, which is quite fun. But what he then said is New Zealand's a bit arrogant about their position in world rugby. Martin Devlin wanted to say they can be arrogant, we can be arrogant, we should be arrogant. He says, no, we need to get our feet back on the ground because we're not going to improve if we don't realize how bad we are. We need to understand. And I think that's the big challenge for me. He understands the game. He understands what needs to be done. He's been there and he knows how to get those guys back in the ground. And that's why I think New Zealand's going to be such a huge threat in the greatest rivalry, rugby's greatest rivalry series, because you've got guys like that who will remind these players that Super Rugby is not the be-all and end-all. Just like the URC doesn't determine the Springbok is going to nothing, because the Springbok team gets selected from players in Japan, players in the Premiership, some guys, you know, all different franchises, and then they play together. So Super Rugby doesn't, you know, yes, the Hurricanes plays a beautiful brand of rugby, and that's a brand that Dave Rennie is going to want to play with the All Blacks. So maybe also Rassie knows what's coming. That's why he's gone for a more mobile team that can match the All Blacks mobility.
Yeah, let's make no mistake. You know, World Cup is next year. Greatest rivalry is this year. Everything is building up to the greatest rivalry, and it's going to be the greatest rivalry. I can't wait. I for one.
And it's less than 2 months away.
Yeah, it's just around the corner, man. It's so close. It's so lucky to be talking about Springboks for a while, for a change, you know. Yeah, moving on. Jan, thank you so much for making time for me. I'm happy we postponed this discussion till after the press conference because we learned a lot there. And yeah, looking forward. Next week we'll do another one after the team's been announced for the game against England. We'll talk about the England side a bit more as well in detail. So yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and it's always lekker to chat.
Thanks, man.